How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video here on the Nat Automotive channel, and in today's video the plan is to get all of the settings dialed in on my titanium welder that I have from Harbor Freight in order to properly weld the front impact bar onto the frame rails of my C5 Corvette. So just a quick little plug before I get to the topic of the video today. For those that don't know, over the past 6 years I built a custom homemade go-kart. I started on it when I was a sophomore in college, and just recently I launched an Etsy store back in December, and the first product I have on that Etsy store is a design packet and kit for the go-kart that I built. And it's a very comprehensive blueprint set for the go-kart that basically gives you all the dimensions and details and parts list of everything you'll need to build a go-kart just like the one I have. If you haven't seen much of my go-kart, go check out, I have a playlist on my channel so you can get caught up to speed. But it's a really awesome project for anyone who wants to get some hands-on fabrication experience and spend some time with friends and family, and then have a lot of fun with something that you can say you built completely from the ground up. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, definitely go check out the link I have in the description below to my Etsy storefront, where I have those blueprints listed up for sale. So what I want to do today is take the time and get the settings dialed in on my newer titanium flux wire welder from Harbor Freight. When I initially did the front impact bar and frame rail repairs a little over 2 years ago, I had the really basic level Chicago Electric flux core wire welder, and it didn't perform very well. It gave me pretty bad welds. Part of it is obviously on me being less experienced with welding, but part of it I think was just the welder itself. And since then I've slightly upgraded to a better flux core wire welder, and I've used this one quite a bit on the go-kart frame when I was doing the modifications and repairs to that, and I was pretty happy with it. And obviously one big thing with welding, any experienced welder will know this, is no matter what welder you have, a key step is getting the settings dialed in based on the type of material that you're welding and the thickness of the material. So that's what I want to do today. I actually have the old front impact bar that I cut off the car that was damaged, and I'm going to cut that up into a few different sections and practice welding on that so I can get my settings dialed in just exactly how they should be for when I actually do the car, because I want those welds to be as strong as possible. So this is the Flux 125 titanium welder from Harbor Freight that I got back in March of last year, and I've used this quite a bit when I was doing the mods and repairs on the go-kart frame, and I've been pretty happy with it. It's performed very well. This one, I can't remember the exact terminology, but this one has a different welding arc technology than the Chicago Electric welders. I think one's an inverter and something like that. I don't know, someone will probably correct me in the comments, but this one uses a different kind of technology than the Chicago Electric ones, and it definitely shows, because it's a lot more consistent of an arc, and you can just tell it just welds a lot better, and it's not that much more expensive. So if anyone's looking for a good entry-level flux wire welder, so it's great for someone who doesn't weld a ton, this is a great option to choose. I'm gonna go ahead and whip out the angle grinder and cut up some sections of the old front impact bar so that I can practice welding and getting these settings dialed in. This is the old impact bar that I cut off the car when I was doing the initial impact bar repair, and you can see how just badly screwed up that thing is in this corner here. But what I want to do in order to help me get my welder settings dialed in for doing that part, I want to cut out a little section. Well, first I want to cut out this piece here, because this is the part where they etch the VIN onto the frame rail. So technically the frame rail, or the impact bar that's on the car, the VIN doesn't match the car. So either at some point maybe I'll put this one over it, or I'll just keep this as a little namesake for the car. But after cutting that out, what I want to do is cut some pieces and then practice with my welder, since I do have a new welder now, and dial in the settings so that when I actually do it on the car, the welds will come out as best as possible. Okay, so I got these sections all cut up here. I've got one here and then one here. You can see this is the really damaged area. And then I also took a flap disc and got all the paint off the areas where I'm going to be welding. So I'm just going to do 2 sections here. Probably will need a welding magnet to hold that, and just probably the other way. So that'll give me 2 good solid areas to practice getting these settings dialed in. So this material is 1/16 of an inch thick, and it is high strength steel. So a lot of welders, what you can do is you can usually pop open the lid, and then you can look in here and get your preferred settings based on the thickness and type of material you're welding. So 1/16 inch thick material is the same as 16 gauge thickness material, so we're going to use this column, and we are also using 0.030 wire thickness, so we're going to use this row here. So for wire speed we should be at about 4, and for voltage we should be between C and C.5. So you're going to go ahead and adjust the dials here on the front of the welder. So for C.5, I'm guessing that's just halfway between C and D, so probably, you know, closer to that end of the range between C and D is where we want to be at, and we want to be at roughly around 4 for wire speed. So that'll get us started, and then depending on how it performs we might have to adjust manually. Alright, so I've got the piece set up vertically like this because I'm trying to simulate how it's going to be on the actual car. So I want to simulate doing a vertical weld like this rather than laying it on this side and doing it flat, because I know obviously gravity comes in when you're doing a weld and how the bead kind of falls. So I'm going to be practicing it just as how it would be on the car. The other thing I'm going to do here that I'm going to do differently than when I initially did these welds is I have this nozzle gel now, which really helps with flux core wire welders and decreasing the area that the spatter sticks to. So I'm just going to gently apply a little bit of this around the areas where I don't want the weld to stick, and then also dip the tip of my gun in here so it doesn't stick to the tip of the gun as well. Okay, ladies and gents, so if you didn't notice, I did pick up again after that last clip. It was another day, so I wasn't too thrilled with the welds and how they turned out, honestly speaking. So I went back, and over this past week, it's the following weekend now, so over the week I did some more research about this welder in particular, flux core wire welders, and in particular welding vertically and not horizontally, and everything with this type of weld joint. And so I did some more research, and I wanted to come back before I actually welded the car to do some more practice, because obviously I want the car to be 100%. And so after some more practice, and honestly it was practice, the big thing was practice with what particular weld bead pattern I was going, and the settings on the welder. So I wanted to go over and show you guys that now. So as you guys can see, this is my little test piece here, the old front impact bar from the car. So I did cut 2 more sections off of the part that I was welding before to get some more practice in. But this weld joint over here is the one that I'm kind of settling with and that I'm pretty happy with. So ignore the bottom part down here. That's when I was still dialing in some of the settings and getting the feel for the pattern that I was doing. But towards this end, the right end of the weld, you can see that I was definitely getting more of that dime stacking look, which from my understanding, based on the videos I've watched, is that's what you're shooting for in a weld, because it shows good penetration and just good coverage without a ton of porosity and everything like that in the weld. So that's, you know, I'm pretty pleased with that, given the fact that I'm using a $160 welder from Harbor Freight with really dirty flux wire, you know, that creates a nasty a flux, you know, slag over the weld. So once you clean it up with a wire brush, it looks good. So I was having issues at first with porosity burning through the material, so that was obviously part of dialing in the settings. But the porosity was huge because that's, you know, when you get little pinholes in the weld, what helped that was cleaning the weld joint really well. Not just with this guy, but with the wire brush wheel on the drill. So that really helped to get rid of the porosity problem. And then getting this good looking weld towards the back here was really a culmination of two things: getting the settings dialed in on the welder, and then also figuring out what pattern I want to use. So first I'll talk about the settings. So this is 16 gauge steel, so 1/16 inch thick. And so on this titanium welder here, using 030 wire, because I know the thickness of wire you use is a determining factor in your settings, I was welding with a voltage just below the D setting, and then a wire speed, you know, about 4.75 on the wire speed dial. And so that was kind of where I was going with the settings, and how I was able to get that dialed in to look like that. So with welding, the big thing is first, you know, because over this past week I watched a ton of videos on flux wire welding with this welder, and then just flux wire welding in general, and then also figuring out what's the best way to weld a vertical bead, because right now how you see this wasn't actually how I was welding it. I was welding it like this, as you probably saw. So because I'm trying to simulate how the weld's going to be on the car to give me my best possible chance for doing it right on the car. So the big thing with that is knowing your welder. Well, first just knowing the principles behind welding, and the science behind it, what you're doing, and then after that, once you kind of know the background behind it, then figuring out how to dial in the settings based on the material and the weld that you're trying to achieve. And then from there, I'd say is just a ton of practice behind the gun. So, you know, that's the name of the game, is just practice, 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 find scrap metal and just practice your heart out. And the last thing I want to touch on before I wrap up this video that was important was figuring out what weld bead pattern I want, because there's tons of different patterns that you can use for welding. So I was kind of making little notes here. So this one, you see some people say do like a zigzag. There's also like a box style, but what worked for me on that weld I just showed you guys that I was pretty happy with was doing this kind of like U as you go up like that, and crossing and kind of just overlapping your previous weld pass, and that kind of helped get that stacked dime look and get good penetration, and figuring out, you know, how far to go left to right to get your weld the way it is. So it just took a ton of practice. But I'm by no means an expert. You know, I'm not trying to create a tutorial. I'm just trying to make this video to share my experience with you guys for someone who might be looking at getting into welding. This is a really awesome little welder for 160 bucks. It's an inverter welder, so it has a better arc than like the standard Chicago Electric welder from Harbor Freight. So this is a great little welder. Comes with kind of like a guide here to show you, you know, how to dial in the settings based on what your weld looks like. But yeah, just practice figuring out this, getting comfortable in the position you're welding in, and having a steady hand, because it's literally like an art trying to delicately move the weld gun, follow the puddle of the molten metal up or sideways or whatever way you're going to get that nice looking weld that's also strong. So again, guys, I just want to reiterate, by no means am I an expert welder. This was just me making a video kind of sharing my experience dialing in the settings with my newer welder that I have. I have welded before, obviously, with my Go Kart build, but that was a few years ago, and that was also with a different welder. So this was kind of me relearning how to weld, mostly like the muscle memory. If you've been welding your whole life as like a career or, you know, a side hobby, I'm sure it's kind of more along the lines of like riding a bike where you kind of just pick it right back up. You never really forget. But with my experience level, some of the things with welding, it was kind of like if you don't use it, you lose it. So I had to kind of relearn that. Like I said, it was mostly with like the muscle memory of like how to kind of move the gun and what to look for with your weld. So like the bead and the puddle of molten metal and how to handle that based on the direction, the, you know, orientation, you know, stuff like that. And of course dialing in the settings for this particular material to get that situated, because the material is obviously a huge part of it, because, you know, a thinner material is more likely to burn through, thicker material is harder to get good penetration, yada 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 yada. So like I said, I just want to make this video sharing my initial experience. This is a great little welder for anyone who wants to get into just welding for fun as like a hobby. Don't really recommend it for like a professional, but as an entry-level welder, it's awesome. You don't need any argon tanks. That's the beauty of Flux core welder, so you don't have to worry about gas tanks and everything like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something maybe and found it entertaining. If you did, definitely give the video a thumbs up. It helps the content and everything like that. And comment below if you have any tips for me, or if you want to just share a thought or you have a question. So subscribe for more content. Literally as soon as I finish filming this video, I'm going to start welding the Corvette while this muscle memory is fresh from welding. So look out for that video to come as well. So thanks guys so much for watching, and other than that, I will see you in the next one.